Dishonest Everything, Everywhere, The Money Laundering Scheme. By Anna von Reitz. Information forwarded to H.E. Cardinal Mamberti and the Vatican Chancery Court regarding our claims, March 6, 2005, January 19, 2023 in Seek. Dishonest Everything, Everywhere, The Money Laundering Scheme. There are two huge foreign municipal corporations operating as federal subcontractors out of the District of Columbia. For simplicity we will call them, the United States, which began as a Holy Roman Empire business, and the USA, which began as a British Territorial Company run by the British Crown. These two organizations came to blows during the so-called American Civil War. The Federal Civil Service employees of the United States fought for the South against the British Territorial Employees who, of course, fought for the North. After the end of overt hostilities, the King's men had to figure a way to soak war reparations out of the southern states, and the Federal Civil Service employees of the United States, known as, mark this, citizens of the United States. This is how they did it. In 1865, they established unauthorized military districts in the southern states, and in each district they established a military district court. See Activities of the Territorial Congress in May of 1865. These courts are actually private corporate bill collection agencies without any true judicial functions. They don't actually consider facts or law, though they give the appearance of justice and make it look like a true court proceeding. In 1868, they followed this up with publication of a phony corporate constitution, issued by a Scottish commercial corporation calling itself, the United States of America, Incorporated, as a means of confusing itself with our Federation of States. This was a completely different kind of constitution than the constitutions that Americans were familiar with, though it appeared to be very similar to the British Territorial Constitution called the Constitution of the United States of America. The advantage of the corporate constitution in the minds of the perpetrators is that its amendments were merely by law changes, and as such, they could be passed and altered without ratification by the states of the Union. Very soon after they passed this piece of fraud off on the public, the Territorial Congress added their first by-law amendment, the infamous 14th Amendment, which reads as legal gobbledygook, but basically makes it illegal for employees of the other municipal corporation to vote in USA elections, and, conveniently, defines citizens of the United States as felons and slaves. Now they have a phony court system and defenseless prejudged targets to aim at. Any American they see, especially in the southern states, can be dragged in, misrepresented as a citizen of the United States, and fleeced. The victims of this scheme can be arrested and unlawfully detained, and their property can be confiscated under these pretenses regardless of who the victims really were or what side they took in the Civil War commercial conflict. The Scottish Commercial Corporation shipped all the loot home to Britain, and the British monarch kicked back a share to the Pope, and they were all happy at the expense of the hapless American farmers they were steamrolling under false pretenses. This system is still in place, and this fraud and pillaging is still going on. They simply create a municipal person out of thin air and name this convenient citizen of the United States after every clueless American, only now they pretend that this municipal person is an offshore corporation belonging to the U.S. Inc. They prosecute the hapless Americans, who don't even know what is going on, and they steal at whim whatever he or she may have of value, and in many cases, also make them serve prison time in a prisons for profit system they have set up, which charges our public purse up to $12,000 per day for incarceration charges. They do the same thing with our children, pretend that we are dangerous felons, citizens of the United States, and they send child protective services to our homes, and these completely clueless goons seize our children and charge our public purse $6,000 a day to keep a normal child and $9,000 a day in round numbers to keep a special needs child in foster care. Such ruthless, unlawful and illegal racketeering has never taken place in the history of the world, much less has it gone on for over 150 years without respite. At this point, we've bought everything of value in England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales over 10 times, and still, so long as everyone gets a cut, the world turns a blind eye to what the Holy See has allowed and what the British Crown and the British monarch have done here. That is the basic genesis of what we call the personage scheme. It is based on impersonating all Americans as citizens of the United States, whether they have any attachment to the municipal, United States, government or not, and then railroading them through the phony military district courts. This scheme has been refined over time as those responsible have been caught out and as they have had to find new excuses for what they are doing. We mentioned that most of the purported citizens of the United States are now defined as municipal corporations and not living people, and as we shall see, these corporations are all foreign offshore corporations, but the same exact process of misaddressing Americans as citizens of the United States continues, and the unlawful and illegal pillaging and plundering at the hands of the British Crown and its territorial forces continues. As part of this personage scheme, the American victim is always misaddressed as the presumed authorized representative of the phony offshore municipal United States corporation that has been created and named after him, and the businesses that he and the corporation named after him are involved in are always reported to be something to do with the interstate manufacture, sale, or transport of alcohol, tobacco, or firearms. This is because alcohol, tobacco, and firearms are the only substances that the federal subcontractors operating as municipal corporations out of the District of Columbia were ever allowed to regulate. The Internal Revenue Service, IRS, builds huge fanciful narratives about each one of us Americans and keeps their cock and bull story in a coded master file that all the other federal departments and agencies rely on as if it was the gospel truth. According to these phony master files, great-grandmothers are dangerous shady rum runners engaged in producing and smuggling rum from distilleries in Barbados, and perfectly normal car mechanics are dangerous felons engaged in illegally selling guns in South America. So the FBI and the BATF and all these other agency goons get all girded up, armed to the teeth, and they tell the clueless local sheriffs about the big bust going down against these dangerous international criminals. And this is all nothing but lies and abuse of power and unlawful pillaging and racketeering spawned by self-interested municipal corporations operated out of the District of Columbia and their unauthorized state-of-state franchise operations. Their charges, generally speaking, have nothing to do with us or any sane reality at all. These federal employees working for the same offending municipal corporations headquartered in the District of Columbia make all this stuff up and then act upon it, killing innocent people who haven't done any harm to anyone, and who have never been engaged in commerce, much less commerce involving interstate manufacture, sale, or transport of alcohol, tobacco or firearms. That's what the BATF did in Waco, Texas, to the Branch Davidian religious sect, and they have yet to face justice for it. Now let's examine the money laundering scheme that has also been built on all these non-existent citizens of the United States, and the municipal corporations named after them. In 1946, the perpetrators of all this rot needed to hide all the profits they made on the Second World War, so they adopted a new bookkeeping system for the government, meaning their own municipal corporations operated out of the District of Columbia. This new system was invented by Easy Eddie O'Hara, Al Capone's accountant, to hide Al's money from the IRS, and while these criminal municipal corporations call it double accrual accounting, most of us know it better as keeping two sets of books. This patently deceitful system separates income into two kinds, budgeted and non-budgeted income. All attention is then focused on the budget, and fights over which special interest gets more or less of the budget, while the heavy-duty money flows right on past into slush funds and political payola from here to Madagascar. There is no competent public accounting in this country, because of this and other tricks that the municipal corporations operating out of the District of Columbia have employed to deceive the public. They have spent generations howling about the budget deficits, to give the people here the wrong idea. That is, that the poor government needs more money to function, and needs to tax them more to continue providing public services. And it's all just more lies and poor mouthing based on the budgeted amount, always without reference to all the non-budgeted money being rat-holed by these charlatans. The global Federal Reserve banking system, the entity that Switzerland provided an enclave to, was given money sufficient to pay for all government services and development of infrastructure in every country on Earth back in 1941. The intention was to relieve everyone from the expense of taxation and government services worldwide. They stole that money and used it for other purposes, initially with the permission of the actual owners, but since 2005, the reprobates have just gone on using all this money, actual gold, for other undisclosed purposes without a contract. The global Federal Reserve banking system has yet to face any consequences for this robbery and needs to be liquidated, with the assets being returned to the control of the actual lawful owners. In 1946, the criminals needed to hide the loot from World War II, and they did it in every way possible, with crooked accounting, with lies and poor mouthing to the public, with the creations of gargantuan insurance and pension funds, investment funds, university endowments, contingency funds, and plain old political slush funds, all being generated unlawfully and illegally by these municipal corporations operating out of the District of Columbia, pretending to represent us, the same American states and people that they have been evading, pillaging and lying to for over 150 years. Next, they hit upon the idea of derivatives, and soon, the foreign offshore municipal corporations deemed to be citizens of the United States, and named after each and every American, were multiplied. What started out as phony infant decedent estates and municipal estate trusts, blossomed into all sorts of derivative offshore corporations operating in all sorts of capacities. We each have a derivative corporation that serves as a public transmitting utility, and several serving as special purpose vehicles, and even one that specializes in child labor contracts, and all without the American public knowing or understanding anything about this. These hapless, clueless Americans are being set up as the fall guys for all this crime, and our names are being used in association with all these bogus foreign offshore municipal corporations that have been named after us, while these same offshore municipal corporations are being used to launder money and carry on illicit businesses like child labor contracting services, and at the end of the day, it is all going to profit the British Crown, with kickbacks being made to the other principals. Our country has been gutted by these thieves and reprobates, our industry undermined, our natural resources cashiered. We do not enjoy spreading this dirty laundry about our country and how it has been commandeered and abused by our erstwhile foreign municipal corporation service providers, but when we are being literally poisoned by what appears to be our own military, we have nothing to lose. We either stand up against this gross criminality and disservice, once we know about it, or we become criminals ourselves. We have not condoned any of this. Our service contracts with these villains are written and published as their respective federal constitutions, and there is no reason for them to assume, presume, or seize upon any other powers or act with any intent but good faith service toward their employers. We wish for all of these criminal municipal corporations to be liquidated and gone from our shores, our assets and credit returned to us unharmed. We and all the other countries which have been illegally, unlawfully, and immorally occupied by these so-called territorial forces, ever since the 1860s in Britain and America, since the early 1900s throughout the former Commonwealth, and since the 1940s in Western Europe and Japan, must be set free from these criminal legal fictions and their purveyors. We wish for every bar attorney on earth to be arrested and re-educated about the lawful purposes of the law, and we wish for the entire legal system and the law of the sea itself to be permanently removed and denied any operation whatsoever with respect to our assets on the land and soil. These so-called public services, including the military services, have all failed their duty to their employers. There is no sense in paying them to perpetuate more crimes like the pandemic and the abuse of Ukraine as a place to nonetheless develop outlawed bioweapons or leave them running around doing services, like destroying the Nord Stream pipeline. These corporations all need to be liquidated and their assets transferred and transitioned back to control of the lawful governments in each country impacted by this horrific fraud. Don't give us the excuse that the criminals themselves manufactured to justify their actions, that is, that the lawful governments no longer exist or are absent, or in interregnum, or never formed, or whatever nonsense these purveyors of fiction offer. We exist, and so do all the other lawful governments. Issued by Anna Maria Riesinger, Fiduciary. The United States of America in care of Box 520994 Big Lake, Alaska 99652. April 4, 2023.